Welcome to Andy Staples on 3. What a day it has been. Jesse Simonton started with maybe the most packed noon slate ever and just went straight into the night into a shootout in Los Angeles. But of course, we start in Tuscaloosa, where Alabama got into a shootout of its own with LSU and then got a stop. And then suddenly, there were no more scores.
I mean, today, are you a big concert going guy, Andy? I don't. Maybe in your youth.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Today was like one of those concert slates where it was just banger on banger on banger. I mean, it was just the next great band, topped by the next great band, and so we got a great noon slate. We got some interesting 3:30 stuff we'll talk about. And then the nightcap delivered. I mean, this was 28-28 all, and then Jalen Milroe and Alabama's defense took over. 3 straight touchdowns coming out of halftime, and that changed the game. And obviously Jalen Daniels getting knocked out kind of spurred or dashed any, upset hopes for LSU, and that was unfortunate. But this was a game where Jalen Milroe, he rides that roller coaster, Andy.
Yeah.
He'll miss a layup, misses a layup touchdown. Very next play, it's a fadeaway, Steph Curry 3-pointer, with your arms up before the ball even goes into the net, where he just wiggles past LSU's defense and runs it in. I think he had like $150 on the ground, 4 touchdowns. We've been waiting for some weeks to kind of see Alabama really involve his legs. And some of it was design runs, but a lot of it was just, the play's broken. Well, I'm a running back, that also has a howitzer. And he was remarkable, when they needed him most.
Well, he and Jayden Daniels were basically doing the same things. I mean, their stat lines were almost identical. Jayden Daniels throws for 219. Jalen Milroe throws for 219. Jayden Daniels runs for 163 and 1 touchdown. Jalen Milroe runs for 155 and 4 touchdowns. They were both, when they needed to, escaping, and the defenses couldn't do anything about them. Now, that Dallas Turner hit puts Jayden Daniels out. I have far less problems with the hit than I do with LSU putting him back in the game. When they're like, oh, your jaw's okay, go back in. And then they're like, oh, wait, maybe we should have checked him for a concussion.
And that was terrible. And you know what else was kind of the difference between Milroe and Daniels is Milroe avoids getting plastered. He kind of has that Lamar Jackson to him where he just never gets pasted, whether he's running, in the middle of the field or getting out of bounds. Whereas Jalen Daniels, that Dallas Turner hit was the last one, but I mean, he took blow after blow after blow on some of his long runs. I mean, he got completely pasted there late in the second, just before halftime on that long run, and remarkably managed to get up and, score another touchdown. I mean, that was insane because hit with his frame to be able to withstand those hits. It's just, it seems unsustainable, and ultimately it was.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the Dallas Turner hit. He hit him in the chest. What was he supposed? He didn't hit him in the head.
Where's he supposed to hit him? Where's he supposed to hit him?
Maybe he hit him late. They did flag him, right? They flagged him for roughing the passer on that play. So, and they did check it for targeting because they check every hit like that for targeting. They just didn't call it. So, I don't know what to tell you. He didn't hit him in the head. So, there are hard hits that are legal that hurt people. It happens. And, again, probably the greater sin is LSU not checking him for a concussion and putting him back in the game instead of putting him in the tent and figuring it out. So, but here's the thing with Alabama, though. Milroe looks more and more comfortable every single game. And Jesse, they got to play at Kentucky and at Auburn. Those are not gimmies by any stretch, but I think they can win those. And then if they do, we were talking about an Alabama-Georgia SEC championship game, probably, unless Georgia loses the next 2 weeks in a row. But I think Alabama can beat Georgia on the right day.
On the right day. Defense is still today their defense was a little optional at times. And that was with the breakdowns, with Jayden Daniels hurting them with their legs. Our buddy Richard Johnson had a good tweet about, this was kind of a cardio game, this game, and USC Washington for the defenses. They were just kind of out there running around. And that is the case. But we have seen Alabama, especially on its best day, do a lot of things defensively. They are a top 5 team in the country when they play well defensively. Dallas Turner is obviously awesome off the edge. It was notable, Braswell did not play much tonight, that they missed him. And that was honestly probably key for LSU because, they were dinged up at right tackle. And so when you don't have that kind of mismatch, Alabama wasn't able to take advantage of it. I think, the fact that they still struggle to run the ball on consistent rundowns outside of Milroe's, freelancing. I mean, McClellan only had 63 yards on like 15 carries.
14 carries. But Roydell Williams had 56 on 6 carries. Like, I don't think it was that bad.
It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. But we're talking about a Tigers defense that ranks in the bottom of a lot of categories. Can you hurt Georgia on the ground, a la the way Missouri at least threatened them today with those stretch runs?
Well, so Tom asked the question, will the CFP committee keep Alabama behind Texas in the polls? And I would say yes. I think they will. I think they'll just move them both up. So, because
it's an entertainment it's an entertainment product until the end. So they could totally flip them, to push the TV ratings. But I think you're right. I think they ultimately keep them one spot behind.
Yeah, and I think they'll move Texas up because Oklahoma dropped, so they're going to drop them. But yeah, this Alabama team is not perfect by any stretch. But this Georgia team is not what it has been the past 2 years. So if they were to meet, then I do think there's a chance on the right day. So for those counting at home, Alabama's at Kentucky next week. They get Chattanooga the following week, and then they're at Auburn. So you do run the risk of one of those Jordan-Hare, the visitor doesn't get out alive type
Spooky
situations.
Season.
Yeah, if Auburn, like Auburn had a good game against Vanderbilt on Saturday. They got a little confidence, but I don't think that they would challenge Alabama this season, just the way things have gone. But I really am impressed with the way Alabama is blocking at this point. It's not like it was. Remember that Arkansas game when Atlanta Jackson was just abusing Caden Proctor and destroying Jalen Milroe. And in the first half of the Tennessee game, it looked bad. It feels like they've figured out a way to protect Jalen Milroe a little bit better.
Well, that, and I think what we saw today, don't you think, Andy, that this is kind of Saban at his best coming on. All right, what do we need to tweak in the bye week? I think what they also probably really harped on, Jalen, is, hey, if it's not there, we know you want to hit that home run, but if it's not there, use your legs, run.
Yeah.
And so there was the QB freelancing, and that it just he carved up Matt House's defense. Now LSU, they were down 4 cornerbacks. Major Burns gets dinged up in this game. I mean, they were just beat to hell in the secondary. That has to be noted. But Alabama did what good teams do. You take advantage, and they continue to survive and advance. They're undefeated in the SEC. They absolutely remain in the hunt, not only to win the SEC championship, but to knock in the door and make the college football playoff.
Jesse, let's head out west to the game that was happening concurrently with LSU, Alabama. Washington, USC. Reminder that Caleb Williams is probably still the best player in college football. He just doesn't have much around him, I don't think. I actually think he might be better this year than he was last year because he doesn't have Jordan Addison. Like, he's not going to win the Heisman.
Worst offensive line.
Yeah, worse offensive line.
Worst offensive line.
Worse defense on the other side of the ball. He's not going to win the Heisman. I get it. But you saw tonight, like, he's freaking magic. And it didn't matter because their defense is terrible.
That Houdini touchdown he had, I think,
oh my God.
I think it tied the game at 35.
Yes.
When on fourth, he he runs back and then just quickly sets his feet, turns his shoulders, and just throws a dart into the corner of the end zone. I mean, that's the stuff that when all these folks who are like, oh, he may not be the number one pick, that's the stuff that's like, no, there's no way an NFL team is not going to take that number one overall. There's maybe 5 guys on the planet that could make that play physically. He was amazing, and yet the difference in the game was that once again, Alex Grinch's defense, they couldn't catch a cold if they're in the middle of flu season. I mean, their tackling is abhorrent. It is abhorrent. The Huskies' deep offensive line showed up today. There was the great stat by the end of the game that Penix and their tailback Dylan Johnson, who had 4 touchdowns, both had 256 yards identical, which was crazy. But I mean, again, USC has 500 some odd yards of offense. Caleb is transcendent. They even get a great rushing game for themselves, 203 yards. The turnover battle's tied, and yet you lose by 10 points because your defense is just a sieve. I mean, it's a picket fence, and I don't even. What else can we say at this point?
Well, Bootzilla in the chat, good point. The difference of the game is Caleb Williams turned it over at the wrong time. He gave him the ball in the red zone, and they cashed it in quickly.
Yeah, and that was costly. But when everything is on Superman's shoulders, he's going to have a kryptonite moment a time or two, right? I mean, he can't.
He's asked to do more than anyone else because, like Jayden Daniels, who I hope he's okay. I don't know. Like, they may not play him against Florida. We'll see what happens with the concussion situation.
Probably don't need to.
But probably going to win the Heisman if this keeps up, unless J.J. McCarthy comes in or one of those guys. But he has Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, who might both be first-round prospects. Caleb Williams doesn't have any of that. And I know that USC is supposed to have all this talent, but I'm not sure they do. And you kind of look at the recruiting that's going on under Lincoln Riley, and you start to wonder, like, where's this going?
Well, he better have a dial on, whoever the number one transfer portal quarterback is. He better have a dial on that. And then if things continue to go south in Waco, he better have Dave Aranda's number on speed dial.
Matthew in the chat asks, how did Washington beat Oregon? Lanning's awful 4th down decisions. That's how. No, they stopped Oregon on those 4th downs. If Oregon makes that last 4th down, they win. I don't know about you, Jesse. I feel like watching Oregon and Washington the past few weeks, if they play again, I would pick Oregon.
I would too.
The fact of the matter is they played and Washington won.
Yeah, I got this question in my mailbag this week, and I thought it was a good point by a Huskies fan. It was a lack of respect, and it was like, so when we beat Oregon for the 3rd time, will we finally, will folks finally stop saying, oh, I think Oregon, even though they lost, is the better team? We'll see. Right now, they're on track for that matchup. Oregon now plays, USC next weekend, and Washington's got to tangle with the feisty Utah Utes and the pig farmer who threw 4 touchdowns today. So the reason I agree with you about the Ducks, though, and again, I understand why Huskies fans can get a little bit chapped by this. I just think they have a second gear that the Huskies don't. The Huskies are awesome offensively, have some issues in the line of scrimmage defensively. But Oregon, as they showed today, I mean, I don't know if we're really going to talk about it, but that's a 14-13 game against Cal. Bo Nix throws an interception on the first play of the game. And it's just you blink and they're up 35-13 at halftime and they win going away. They hang 63 on them. Yeah. I don't know if the Huskies can do that. They did prove today you can get back on track again. What's the best medicine if your offense is kind of, a little clunky the last few weeks?
Play Alex Grinch's defense.
Play Alex Grinch's defense.
It's unbelievable. But I really do want to see USC against Oregon because I think it's a different style completely. I don't think USC is going to score nearly as much against Oregon. But how much is Bucky Irving going to run for?
Oh, again, based on the tackling that we've seen previously, I think he can at least come close to Dylan Johnson's 250 tonight.
Oh, it's going to be crazy. I can't believe it. we got to talk about the team that we've been talking about all week off the field. They did play on the field tonight. Michigan beat Purdue.
You got to tell me about this one. I got very little eyes on this one. What was it? What was the?
Michigan went up early. They went up 17-0 early.
I saw
Purdue
that.
made it a 20-6 game at halftime, and then it was about a quarter and a half between the second and third quarters that Purdue held serve, and then Michigan just turned on the afterburners. There was one play where Michigan's defensive line pushed Purdue's entire offensive line into Hudson Card. It was brutal to watch. Like, they're really good on the field. We haven't talked about, oh, I'm sorry, it was 41-13, not 41-6. We have not talked about what happened.
Backbreaker, the backdoor cover touchdown.
Yeah, exactly. We have not talked about all the stuff that happened Friday on the show because we didn't have a show on Friday, but you had Santa Ono, the president of Michigan, releasing sending a letter to Tony Petitti, the commissioner of the Big Ten, saying, "Hey, if you got all this evidence and you want to do something to us, you could say you're investigating us because you haven't even said that yet." And
we'd like due process.
Yes, they would like due process, and I'll blame them for that. Connor Stalions resigned. I'm using air quotes here. According to him and his lawyer in Michigan, but we all know what really happened. The whole situation is just crazy because Chris Ballas from the Wolverine, he was the first person with that Santa Ono letter. He released it on Saturday, but on Friday, Chris reported that the Big Ten came in and Michigan was ready to fight. Michigan was ready to go to the mats, and according to what Chris reported, the Big Ten was like, "Here's some evidence we have." And Michigan's like, "Oh, crap." That was what Chris reported on Friday. Now, it feels like this thing sort of runs in waves where they go, "Whoop, this might be it." And they're like, "No, we're fighting this thing." So I think they're in we're fighting this thing mode right now, but I don't know. I'm not really sure.
Wasn't the other report on Friday? This was like, I think this is not the own you think it is, which is Michigan release or some Michigan insider. I forget who.
That was Chris Ballas. That was our guy.
Chris Ballas. Okay, yeah. Also had the report that it was Ohio State behind the private investigation, which is not overly surprising. But
two things on that. It doesn't matter how it came to be if it proves you did something wrong. It's not a court of law. Like, evidence can't get thrown out for being improperly obtained. Like, in a criminal trial, yes, absolutely. If you find out the evidence was improperly obtained, it's getting tossed. That doesn't work that way in NCAA land. But there's more to it than that. Because if that really happened and Michigan gets punished and nothing else happens to anybody else, like, the next time anything goes on, like, if I'm Michigan, I'm hiring PIs to investigate everybody. I'm not messing around.
It just makes the story so much juicier. It's fantastic. I mean, this is going to be the best 30 for 30 in a decade.
Oh,
once all this unravels.
Yeah, and we don't know what happens next. I mean, everybody thinks they have some clue of what's going to happen next. I don't. All I know is Michigan plays Penn State next week. And
all I know is that seems like there might be more Connor Stalions videos out there.
It does sound that way, but I'm excited for that game because this is the first real challenging opponent they've played, and I want to see them play one. And I think they can beat them, but I want to see it.
Oh, definitely. And the Nittany Lions, they played with energy. They bounced back today. Drew Aller, had it. They immediately got a stop on fourth down on Maryland's opening drive, and they just. Did you see? Here's a fun fact, Andy. Here, we'll play a little game, play a little quiz here.
All right.
How many yards rushing? Do you know this stat offhand or no?
I don't know what the stat you're going to ask me about is.
How many yards rushing when you take away sacks? How many yards rushing did Maryland run for today? Was it A, 10, B, -30, C, -2, or D, 6?
I'm going to go -30 because that sounds most impressive.
It was -2 when you take away sacks.
Taking away sacks, wow.
When you add in sacks, it was -49.
Yikes. Yeah, look, we know Penn State's defense is good. That's not even the issue. It's can they score?
Right, and they did today. Again, Aller had 4 touchdowns. Dante Cephas, we've been waiting 2 months for the Kent State transfer to finally pop. He had a couple scores, his biggest game, in a Nittany Lions uniform. So I'm excited about that one too. I think you're going to be there, right?
I am going to be there. I cannot wait. It's because I want to see this Michigan team against a good team. Forget all the other stuff. I'm just talking about on the field. Like, we've been waiting for this all year, for them to play somebody that will challenge them. And this is potentially that team. And if they don't get challenged, well, that's even more interesting. So
yeah,
I can't wait. Let us move to Bedlam, which ended in probably the sweetest way ever for Oklahoma State fans. Fans rushing the field. They're playing "We Are Never, Ever, Ever Getting Back Together" by Taylor Swift as the fans rush the field. Mike Gundy does the "How About Them Cowboys" in the locker room. What a win for the Cowboys.
Well, actually, Andy, this was like kudos to their PA guy or sound guy or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Because the second Stoops gets stopped short. So Drake Stoops gets stopped short at midfield. Oklahoma has the ball with a chance to win the game, down by or tie the game or win the game. Stoops gets stopped short. They immediately start playing DJ's Khaled, "All I Do Is Win."
Yeah.
So they play that. Then the fans rush the field and they're playing the Taylor Swift. So it was just an awesome 1-2. Mike Gundy, 3-15 entering today against Oklahoma. For him, he's 1-0. He says, I won the last one. That's the one that matters. This game was choppy, seesaw, back and forth. I think there was like 4 or 5 ties, lead changes. Bad pick, bad interception by our man there. But he turned around and he's the Heisman still. I think he still has a chance. A $137 on the ground and 2 scores after throwing the bad pick.
Well, here's the thing. Ollie Gordon, not a thrower of the football normally.
No.
So I don't necessarily put that on him.
No, it was a bad trick play.
Oklahoma's turnovers cost them dearly. All of Oklahoma State's points in the second half came off of Oklahoma turnovers. The Oklahoma fans are done with Jeff Lebby. They're ready to move on to an offensive coordinator. I don't even know. I mean, I'm not sure that's necessarily the issue, but they're not as good as we thought they were when they beat Texas, for sure. The question is, where are they? Is this where it kind of ends for them? Because they are not now in line to make the Big 12 championship game. They need help. They need Iowa State to beat Texas would be the thing that would help them the most. But I don't like Oklahoma State. Their remaining Big 12 opponents are UCF, Houston, and BYU, I believe. Like,
I believe you are correct.
I don't think they're going to lose to those teams. Although, we don't know. This team did lose to South Alabama earlier in the season, but they seem to have come back pretty well from that.
They've won 5 straight Big 12 games. Gordon's rushed for 100 yards 6 straight weeks. I mean, Gundy's got this team back on track, and they don't. It's not overly pretty, but they get it done. I mean, the Pokes have kind of found a way each week. How about this for an OC trade? Oklahoma fans are sick of Lebby. You've got Arkansas. They just fired Dan Enos. Pittman with a big win today, though. Colorado inexplicably demotes Sean Lewis. What about Sean Lewis to Oklahoma? Lebby back to the SEC to Arkansas.
Well, it's the same offense that Lebby runs.
That's what I'm saying.
You'd be getting a different version of the same offense. Lebby would be going back to Arkansas where they ran Kendall Briles' offense, which is the same offense. So, I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense. By the way, as we speak, 16 seconds left in the first half. Colorado has 3 points.
Yes.
So the OC change may not have worked.
And they had 0 yards rushing, I believe, after the first quarter, which was the impetus for the move.
Yeah, you're not going to believe this, but when you can't block, it's usually not the OC's fault.
A week after Deion, is complaining about an offensive line that he put together via the transfer portal and now can't cut too. I mean, it was a bad 1-2 punch for Coach Prime this week.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Oklahoma State is in the driver's seat. Well, let's move. I know we've been going sort of reverse chronologically, but let's stay on topic here. We'll stay on the Big 12. Let's move to Texas.
Okay, Texas. Okay.
Well, we can talk. Kansas knocks off Iowa State, which knocks them out of first place in the Big 12. So Kansas and Iowa State both now have 2 conference losses. Lance Leipold is maybe the greatest coach of all time.
Back-to-back Big 12 wins for the first time in 15 years.
Yeah.
It's 7 wins for the first time in a season since 2008 too. I mean, just the dude gets it done. He can get a blank check from Michigan State if he wants one tomorrow,
or anybody else who has Let's be real here. So let's go down to Austin though, where Texas takes a huge lead, blows said lead. Kansas State comes back, misses a chip shot field goal that would tie, but then gets the ball back.
PAT.
Yeah, misses a PAT as well. Yep. Gets the ball back, does tie, but then Chris Kleiman, because he's had some kicking issues, goes for it on 4th down in double overtime instead of kicking a field goal to tie, which I admit, not a sure thing, but 4th and goal from the 4 is very much not a sure thing. And that's the end of the game. Here's
why it was the wrong move.
I understand the die on your feet thing, but the defense was playing so well for K-State. Like, try the chip shot field goal and let your defense try to win it for you.
I 100% agree. Here's why it was the wrong move, Andy. Malik Murphy was red hot in the first quarter. 3 incompletions, but he had 167 yards. Those a touchdown strike to A.D. Mitchell. He was ice. He was like Coors Light ice cold the rest of the game. I mean, he was awful. He single-handedly was the reason Kansas State got back into the game. He threw a couple terrible interceptions, probably should have thrown about 5 picks, multiple ones that were dropped. Texas desperately needs Quinn Ewers back if they're going to win the Big 12 championship and reach the college football playoff. The fact that he only had 12 completions, I wrote a takeaways piece about this game earlier today. He had 12 completions the final 3 quarters, averaging 3.3 yards per attempt. Make him beat you in tight windows in the red zone. Just obviously
load up the box.
Load up the box. Don't let Dylan Brooks, or Jonathan Brooks get downhill and make Murphy.
DJ Baxter was running well too.
Yeah, he had there was, you and I talked about this before, but there was 2 of the coolest plays of the day. One was in this game, which was the fake tush push, toss right on 4th and short.
Yep.
Baxter goes for 55-yard touchdown. And then in the USC game, circling back to that one real quick, how sweet was that little delayed stretch play turns into a reverse flea flicker, wide open touchdown. I mean, that was just, you talk about Lincoln Riley getting in his bag, cooking up. He may not have a clue of how to field a defense, but the man can dial up some really sweet plays. So
yeah,
this is a big win for Texas. I don't think they win this game last year.
I don't either. And that's what makes this so huge. You can say what you want. You can criticize the Kleiman call, however you want to do it. Texas wouldn't have won this last year. They wouldn't have won this the year before. This is the game that would have broken Texas, and it didn't break Texas. They are still in position to win the Big 12. They have at TCU, at Iowa State, and then they get Texas Tech at home on Black Friday. At Iowa State is the trickiest one left, but they can win all these. And then you're talking about—
and they should. They should.
Maybe probably Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and honestly, frankly, they're going to be the much more talented and deeper team than all these teams. I do think they need Quinn back because he is a stabilizing presence. He's thrown, I think, around— the exact stat, apologies, but it's something around 220 passes this season. He has 3 interceptions. Malik Murphy has thrown 60 balls the last 2 weeks and has 3 picks with multiple dropped interceptions. They got to have better quarterback play. They need Quinn back. But hey, you survive in advance. You win your clunkers. They jumped. They got off to a hot game against a quality team. They let Kansas State sneak back into it, but they still survived.
They did. They did. And this is a key. Like, this is one of those that you go back to and you say, this is where it turned, where it changed for Texas, because we've been waiting to see this for years. They won a game against this is a good team. This is a good Kansas State team. They won a game that was close, that they would have folded before, and now they are in position to do something special. The question is, can they carry it out? Let us move on, Jesse, to the team that has done something very special each of the past 2 years, still rolling to maybe do it this year too. Georgia did not look dominant for most of the day against Missouri, but Missouri's pretty good, and Georgia put them away at the end.
Yeah, this was just a choppy game. I thought there was a lot of poor officiating on both sides. They kind of stalled a lot of the game's momentum, but there was a lot of stoppages. Again, it was kind of a clunky performance, but Georgia came out in the second half like they've done, been apt to do the last 2 years under Kirby Smart. They scored 2 big touchdowns on their first 2 possessions. That kind of allowed them to kind of take control. And then in the second half, and then in the fourth quarter, it was, Brady Cook kind of turned into a pumpkin a little bit. Georgia had 2 big interceptions, a couple big sacks, and that was the game. That's how, you turn what was it, like 10-10 at halftime into a 9-point win, and you move on and have another big top 10 game against Ole Miss next weekend.
Yeah, and the part I keep wondering with Georgia, we've seen, like, we saw Tua come back after that tightrope surgery on his ankle for that Orange Bowl, where he got hurt in the SEC championship game. He's back for the Orange Bowl. Like, where are we realistically thinking Brock Bowers can come back? What game are we talking? Are we talking SEC championship, or are we talking not till the playoff? If you make,
I would say SEC championship. I would say, though, watching, I think there's less concern. I think when they get Brock back, that's just going to be, like icing on the cake. I think I think that makes them
unbeatable is not the right word, but
you're not
closer
wrong.
To that.
You're not wrong, but here's who I think they need back more, and that's Amarius Mims. The offensive line part of the reason why Georgia did not run away from this game is that the offensive line played really poorly in the first half. They did not create a lot of lanes in the run game. Carson Beck got sacked several times. He got hit a couple more times. And so, they're playing Truss out at right tackle. He's not really a right tackle. They're playing a, freshman at left tackle. Ernest Green's done well, but I think they need Mims back to put him in. He was apparently, went out there in warm-ups today. He's another guy that had this tightrope surgery just several weeks, before Brock. You get him back, and I think that shores up maybe some concerns. Missouri gave Georgia some problems with that stretch run game. They're playing a lot of youth at linebacker too. I think as they kind of, get more and more reps, you kind of maybe shore some of that up. That's not exactly what Ole Miss does well, so I'm not sure that's going to be a huge issue next week.
Here's the problem if you're
26
Tennessee
straight
too.
Wins.
Yeah, here's the problem if you're Tennessee. You're basically like Georgia's basically playing the same offense 2 weeks in a row, so they're going to get acclimatized in the Ole Miss game.
And the Rebels have a lot better receivers.
Right. And I think you saw, and we'll talk about Ole Miss, Texas A&M in a bit, but I think you saw that the Ole Miss defense is pretty vulnerable if your quarterback's hot.
Yeah. And they've Ole Miss's defense has benefited. They were a top 25 unit going into the day, but Pete Golding's unit has benefited a little bit of, facing some of these, I don't want to call them craptastic, but less than explosive SEC offenses. The Auburns, the Auburns of the world. They've kind of taken advantage of several of those.
Right. And Alabama, Arkansas, got Alabama in Jalen Milroe's first start after the USF game benching. Like, they didn't really get the version of the Alabama offense that you get now.
Yeah, but they're in the, they've beaten Arkansas during this winning streak. The Razorbacks are nothing to write home about offensively.
All right, let's talk about A&M and Ole Miss, because for a while there, I was thinking this was going to be a dominant Ole Miss win, but before the blocked field goal touchdown return, which felt a little fluky in terms of scoring.
It's about to be 21-0.
Right. I'm thinking, I don't know. I mean, maybe they're just not, this is it. And the A&M fans are like, we're done. I don't know that this is the mandate where you go, we're going to raise $76 million to fire this man. But I will say, you have 4 losses. Your ceiling this season is 8-4. Probably not going to wind up being that. You're 3 games. Jimbo is 3 games behind where Kevin Sumlin was at this point in his tenure. What do you do, Jesse?
I think there's going to be some hat passing tomorrow at church. I think maybe you don't raise all the $76 million, but you go ahead and start. You get that little pot moving, and you just start passing it down, and just say, hey, let's see what you got, and what are you willing to chip in today, and we may need a little bit more next week.
I mean, Mississippi State's coming to College Station next week. Like,
you're not going to lose to Miss.
Well, if you lose that one, it's over. Yeah. But I don't think they're going to lose to Mississippi State.
No.
Mississippi State looked like they didn't have a pulse against Kentucky. So I think Zach Arnett's going to be gone at some point. So the question
I would say that's Jimbo. A strong bet.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Zach Arnett's buyout is $4.5 million. There's also an offset. So Zach Arnett's going to get hired as a defensive coordinator somewhere else in the SEC or somewhere in the Big Ten. And Mississippi State's going to owe $0 because $1.5 million a year is less than the going rate for a good DC. And Zach Arnett is a good DC. Jimbo's a different story. No offset, $76 million, 25% of it up front. That is a lot of freaking money.
It is, but I mean, here's the problem, Andy. And I said this on Feinbaum last week, and I wrote a column about it. It's over. It's over. Whether it's this year, next year, whatever. You know what? It's going to be a record buyout next year. It's going to be a record buyout in 3 years. It's going to be a record buyout in 2029.
Yes.
So just
somebody's going to break that Gus Malzahn record by 2029, most certainly, Jesse.
Well, we'll see. But right now, Jimbo's deal is still on track to be the most expensive buyout ever, if and when they have to pay it, because he's guaranteed this money one way or another. So
yeah,
I think you have to move on, because there is talent. There is talent there. Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart. I mean, like, Max Johnson is not it at quarterback, but those receivers are great. The freshman running back. There is obviously a lot of possibilities with that roster. They just need some competency in coaching to put them over the top. Now we'll see who that is. I don't know. What do you think about if Mississippi State does move on? Because that was an abhorrent performance, 24-3 loss to Kentucky. How much money should they be willing to put on the table to get Dan Mullen to go back to Starkville? New AD there, so maybe there's not as much bad blood. I don't know.
Zach. So, the AD who he left Mississippi State for was his AD at Mississippi State. True. So, Zach Selman, Oklahoma ties, played at Wake Forest. So, I don't know where he would go naturally in his mind, but
it's such a tough job. I just like
if Dan Mullen would take it, if he would entertain it, yeah, because he clearly is, demonstrated success there, knows how to win there. He does not have to recruit the kind of players he would have had to recruit at Florida. Like, the reason he got fired at Florida has nothing to do with what he would be doing at Mississippi State, because it's a totally different recruiting job.
And I think he honestly would be attractive to folks in the transfer portal, because he would say, hey, I'm going to put you in an offense that can get you to the NFL.
Yeah.
For guys that would want to move up. I think
I would make the call. I don't know if he'd say, he seems to be enjoying the TV life, but I'd make the call.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah, they're going to have to. Willie Fritz is a call I'd make too, even though he's a little bit older. The dude wins. So
I think he's waiting for that that Lance Leipold.
Oh yeah, no. He's if Leipold leaves Kansas, Willie Fritz is going to crawl to Lawrence if he can get there. So, but yeah, the Jimbo thing is fascinating to me because you are right. It is going to have to happen because they're paying for SEC and national titles. They're not getting that. They are getting a coach who says our goal is bowl eligibility, and that cannot sustain. And it's not going to ever get any better. They're like, he's never going to get them there. And now you're right. It is a ton of money now, a ton of money next year, a ton of money the year after that, a ton of money the year after that. What did an athletic director that you and I used to cover famously say, Jesse Simonton?
What must happen eventually must happen now.
Yeah, Jeremy Foley, former Florida athletic director, what must be done eventually must be done immediately. And that brings us to another game in the SEC, Florida and Arkansas. Now, I am not advocating for anybody getting fired at Florida because I don't think they have the money to do it. And I don't know if they should.
That, and they don't want to. The fact that Florida's recruiting at a top 5 level, they don't
correct.
They don't want to put a blowtorch to a recruiting class that they believe could be the centerpiece of their turnaround. You and I have talked about this a lot. This is a difficult. We talked about this last week when they got blasted by Georgia. This is the difficulty of trying to replicate what is happening in Athens and Tuscaloosa while not living in a Sims world. This is not a video game.
Right.
You're not playing NCAA, so you can't hit pause on what's happening there and fast forward.
Can't rage quit. Yeah.
No, this was such a terrible loss, though, for Billy Napier and the Gators. To lose to this reeling Arkansas team,
and the way they did.
You have to have a chance to become bowl eligible. You're immediately down 14-0 in a blink. You're down 14-0. You crawl back. You take a late lead, and then you allow them to tie the game. Game goes to overtime.
But you have a missed extra point. You had 2 situations where 10 guys are out there on the field goal block team. You get called for illegal substitution because your field goal team is running on the field when you're trying to clock it.
But do we need a special teams change?
And you wait, and in the explanation, Billy Napier says a player is in charge of telling the field goal team when to run on the field. You know how you can avoid that? Have a special teams coach who isn't an analyst.
The game-changing coordinator isn't even allowed to participate in changing the game. They're relying on.
But he's changed the game a lot
on a player instead. This is the man who was lauded for having like the army of assistants, and we come to find out that it's a lowly walk-on that is signaling.
Our guy Nick Delatorre asked him about special teams and miscues in the press conference, and Billy Napier's like, "What? What do you mean?" And then Nick just gives him the laundry list from this game alone. And then, if I'd have been Nick, I'd be like, "Would you like the ones from the other games as well?" Like, I don't know if we have enough time, but
and I want to agree. I want to say this. I'm in agreement with you. Billy does not need to be fired. They're just in an extremely precarious position because
they can't keep firing coaches. It's not you're not going to get what they want that way.
You can't keep firing coaches, but you're pinning a hell of a lot of hopes on a 5-star quarterback in DJ Lagway next season. Whether he starts or not, he is obviously the future. And the 2024 schedule is just hellacious with 12 Power 5 games. This also, to kind of circle this back to A&M for a second, Andy, part of the issue for Jimbo, too, is that it's not just that his own program is not meeting expectations. It's that Texas is now doing what Texas is doing. That's a huge issue in the Longhorn State, whereas the same thing with Florida. Gator fans are even more upset and have more room to gripe because their biggest rival, Georgia, is still number 1, has won 26 straight games, and is a back-to-back national champion.
And Florida State is number 4 in the.
And Florida State is now on the ascent. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. Now flip this to the other side. Arkansas, phenomenal win for them. 6 losses in a row. They snapped that losing streak. Sam Pittman fired Dan Enos after losing 7-3 to Mississippi State. He raises Kenny Guyton up to OC. Kenny Guyton had a really good day. You know what Kenny Guyton? Well, now you get Rocket Sanders back, which helps. But you know what Kenny Guyton realized? KJ Jefferson is 6'4", 240 pounds and pretty fast. And maybe you should just run the ball with him.
Well, that's why I mentioned the Levy move, because they went back to the more air raidy type scheme.
Yeah.
With Guyton.
Well, no, that's not the air raid. Brow's offense, not air raid. Different offenses.
I mean, Brow, the Baylor offense. Excuse me, not air raid. The Baylor offense. Excuse me, the Baylor offense. But they went back to that sort of scheme, and yeah, I mean, this was Sam. I'm gonna have me a cold beer Pittman. He needed this one because he's got a bad buyout too. I had a list of coaches who needed.
Well, the buyout got more expensive with the win.
It did because it changed that record. So I had a list of coaches before this week that really needed a win. Both he and Tom Allen came up with big W's today. So
my son came home from school. Speaking of Tom Allen, my son came home from school yesterday and said, we did a pick 'em at school. I think I might have messed up. I picked Indiana to beat Wisconsin. I'm like, you definitely messed up. And then this afternoon, I'm like, nope, you're right.
Nailed it.
Go Hoosiers.
Nailed it.
Wow. I mean, Jesse, that noon slate was wild. So that A&M game we talked about, that Florida game we talked about, that Texas K-State game we talked about. There was another game in the noon slate that bears discussion, and that is Notre Dame Clemson. Tyler from Spartanburg lit a fire.
That was some a cathartic Clemson win right there. That's what that was. That was Dabo puffing his chest, telling everyone to buy stock in the Tigers. We still can't do anything offensively. We still got a quarterback that can't complete a 10-yard pass, but his best play was a pooch punt. But we got a running back in Phil Maffa that ran for 200 yards. That was awesome. Yep. We got a defense that just hounded Sam Hartman. I mean, they made poor Sam look like, Yosemite Sam, just shooting himself in the foot. He had a couple terrible interceptions.
That defense really did come up, though, because when Notre Dame made it 31-23, at that point in the game, it felt like Notre Dame was going to win.
And then they got stop after stop after stop. Yep. 3 straight stops, including one of those interceptions. Jeremiah Trotter, with one of the games of the season from an individual defensive performer, 11 tackles. He came up with 2 huge sacks. He had the big pick 6. Just a fantastic performance. And, I don't know if Tyler from Spartanburg was a plant, Andy.
I don't think he was a plant. I think Dabo's ego is too big to have a plant that is insulting him that personally.
Maybe not, but I'm saying Dabo had every single one of those stats off the dome, and whether it was a plan or not, the motivational ploy or call worked, because Clemson clearly heard it, and this was, again, they still have a lot of existential questions to answer after this season. They still have a lot of problems offensively and philosophically. But this was, like I said, I think this was a cathartic win. Suddenly you're not facing the chance of missing a bowl game for the first time ever under Dabo. You got a couple, tough ones to end the season, but you're 5-4. You're feeling good. Dabo says we should be 9-0. Well, we'll see how they finish the rest of the year.
Yeah, and Notre Dame probably played its way out of the New Year's Six.
Definitely did, I think.
Yeah, so that's I don't know what happened there. That defense had been great all season, and to let Phil Maffa just run through them like that was a little bit shocking.
It was. I agree. I did not see this letdown coming. This was not a game I bet, on the best bets. I was a little skeptical because of how much all the stuff and noise around Clemson this week. You really didn't know how the team was going to respond. They were down 11 starters, so it was, again, they showed some impressive resiliency, and folks find motivation however they can, Andy.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Another game in that noon window that was just loaded was Ohio State Rutgers. Now, you look at the final score and you're like, this game was very interesting for about 3 quarters.
This game, I don't know how much eyes you got on this game, Andy. This was one
I watched the whole thing because I had the 4 box going.
Me too. So this was Rutgers. Greg, you're sick. You already have clinched a bowl game. You're 6-2. You're playing with house money. For them to settle for 3 field goals inside Ohio State's 4-yard line in the first half, that was just like you're playing not to win. You're simply playing not to win. I know Ohio State is not the Ohio State of yesteryear offensively. Kyle, as the Sickos committee has nicknamed him, Kyle Honda McCord. So he's Honda McCord while
Maserati Marv and Honda McCord. Yes,
Maserati Marv. But it's just for our listeners. I mean, it's pretty good. Kudos to the Sickos committee on that one. But I mean, he wasn't doing anything. So I just did not like the way that Schiano managed that because it played not to win. So you're only up 9-7 at halftime. You're then driving in the third quarter. The game completely flips on a 93-yard pick six. And from pretty much there, Ohio State just handed the ball to Travion Henderson, and Harrison caught a couple short touchdowns.
I'm hesitant to make any judgments until I see Michigan versus Penn State. But does it not seem that Michigan has the more dynamic roster at this point? Which has been a long time since we could really say that. Michigan's won the last 2, but I don't know that you would have said that Michigan definitively has a better roster than Ohio State. It looks like they do right now.
Well, what's been – yeah, they do. And the difference is, Andy, they have the best quarterback for the first time.
They definitely have that.
They've had the best offensive line the last few years. They just haven't had the trigger man. Now J.J. McCarthy is, number 2 nationally in passing efficiency, in yards per target. And they're not – Michigan's not, like, overly explosive at receiver, but Roman Wilson's good enough.
Mm-hmm. And they have the best offense, the better offensive line, the better defensive line probably.
Yes.
The better secondary probably, although that one's close. The better backs, maybe?
I think on a healthy day, I'm taking Travion Henderson.
Now, obviously, Ohio State has the better receivers. But I don't know. I don't unless Penn State shows Michigan to be something different than they were because they haven't been playing good competition, which I don't think is going to happen, by the way. I think Michigan is going to be pretty superior to them. I don't like Ohio State's chances against the Wolverines.
No, and I think that's why a lot of folks, there was some folks upset after the first CFP rankings that did not like the fact that, I don't know, during the broadcast, and again, it's an entertainment product. This is going to all sort itself out. Ohio State has 2 of the better wins of the season so far, beating Notre Dame.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah,
they got to play each other, so it'll be fine.
Right, but the point I was trying to make that I went a little sideways there was after they released the rankings, Fowler, Herb Street, David, all these guys, they're talking, and they all basically say, well, we don't actually think Ohio State's the best team. We think they'll lose to Michigan. And so then why are they ranked number 1? Well, they're ranked number 1 because they have, the best wins now. But I agree with you. They are going to be underdogs for a reason at the end of the season in the Big House, come that last weekend for Thanksgiving.
Let's talk about a couple games in the ACC before we go. Louisville, by the way, 34-3 over Virginia, a Virginia Tech team that had been playing fairly well in recent weeks. Louisville put the hammer down. I ask again, and I say this every time I bring up Louisville these days, how did this team lose to Pitt?
I don't know, because this defense is feasting. They pitched a shutout against Duke last weekend. Second straight game without allowing a touchdown. I think they held Vatek under 150 yards. And Jeff Brom, credit to him. He brought in Plummer at quarterback, but Plummer's just a jag. Today they didn't have Jamari Trash, who's their best receiver. And so he said
his name's not Trash, unfortunately.
Jamari Thrash, yes. Jamari Thrash. I couldn't get it out. But they, credit to Braun because he wants to chuck the pill. But the last 2 weeks, he has just rode that ground game. And today they had the transfer who had 150 yards. Jordan chipped in another 50. I mean, it was just, it's ground and pound and awesome defense. And now you look at their remaining schedule. Right now they're number 2 in sole possession to play Florida State, which clinched a spot in the ACC championship game today, and that could be the matchup.
In a game where they were playing without their 2 best receivers, and it took them a while to get going against Pitt, but they did finally win that game.
Yeah, Jordan Travis finished with a career day in passing, but it was a little clunky until the third quarter.
And I know we keep saying Miami is the one these teams have to worry about because Miami has to play Florida State and then Louisville. Miami
Did they lose
lost
to NC
20 to 6 to NC State. They looked kind of tepid the whole night.
Yeah, Van Dyke was really bad.
So I think we're headed toward a Louisville Florida State ACC championship game. I think real good chance Florida State's undefeated in that game.
Yes, because that Miami, you could say with the way Florida State played early today, oh, maybe they were looking ahead to the Hurricanes. Look ahead spot. They play Miami next weekend. You don't have your best 2 receivers. Well, their defense showed up. The Seminoles played. They forced 3 more turnovers. They hounded, Pitt. Pitt is next to nothing. They're last in the ACC on offense, but they played as such today. And the Seminoles, they're a complete team, and they have a strong case to continue to move up these rankings, with each week because they just, even if they don't play their A game, they still win seemingly convincingly.
Yep. So big week ahead. Michigan, Penn State, whatever else happens with Michigan, because God only knows what stories will come out.
At least one a day.
Yeah, given the last week and a half with Michigan stories, like I have no clue. I will believe almost anything at this point. Like you could give me 4 potential stories, and I'd be like, all of them. So we got all that. We got Georgia Ole Miss. We got Oregon USC, which I'm not even concerned about the result of the game because I'm pretty sure Oregon's going to win. It's just how bad will USC look? And I got a question for you, Jesse. Do you think they do anything mid-season with Alex Grinch, or do you think they just sort of ride it out and then make that decision at the end of the season?
I mean, at this point, you would have thought they would have ripped that Band-Aid off weeks ago. So maybe he does because the pressure mounts after giving up nearly 600 yards again. But I mean, I don't even think that's going to change other than just throwing, a body to the wolves. I'm not really sure how much that's even going to change because so much of it is just they lack the fundamentals.
Yeah, it's been slow on the coaching carousel front. Normally by now some things have happened. So far, we've only gotten Arkansas offensive coordinator firing. I think there's going to be
Indiana.
And Indiana offensive coordinator firing, correct. I think there's going to be some movement starting tomorrow.
I would agree. I mean, right now we, in terms of head coaches, we only had 2 head coaches fired, none for on the field reasons.
Yeah. It's coming, and I don't know. I think ADs have sort of gone back and forth now about, do I have to get in the queue early, or does it matter? Because you can do your work behind the scenes if you're planning to fire somebody. But what are the shoes to drop? What happens at A&M? Because you're either going to have to do something or give the dreaded vote of confidence at some point. I don't know if you have to do that now. That might be a later kind of thing, but I don't know. There's a lot.
Washington, Utah next weekend too.
Washington, Utah. That's right. That's right. Just because Utah lost to Oregon doesn't mean Utah will definitely lose to Washington. Tennessee, Missouri is going to be a great game. This is quite an enjoyable November. I like the way this is going. You know, this year, the 14 playoff, I wish there was a 12 team this year. I think it would be even more fun. But I think this is giving us an idea of how much fun it will be when all of these teams are going to be in it. Because, like, Oklahoma State today would have put itself in the mix for a playoff berth with that win.
And Notre Dame probably played itself out of one.
Exactly. So you would have seen stuff like that. But Ole Miss would have put itself a little closer to one because you might be able to get away with a loss to Georgia if you're 10-2. And that game was very close. I mean, so yeah, there's a lot to look forward to, but I do think Sunday might be a newsy day. Let's just leave it at that. Jesse, get some sleep.
I gotta figure out my AP top 25 here. So,
all right. Well, we will talk to you again very soon, maybe sooner than you want to.
All right.